Okay, hello. Today we'll talk about two architects. One of them was born on this day, the 24th of February. The other one is choice a little bit capricious, but it's just a short introduction to the works of Eric Owen Moss, an architect who can irritate even with his choices. Let's see. A building by Eric Owen Moss. This is not the more ample presentation I have on him. It's just a short aide-memoire of some of the works that he built. What do we see here? We see some kind of a dancing building. We see some kind of a, fragmented building that refuses to follow the conformity road and shows some angst even. This is a tower he built. He works and lives and builds a lot in Culver City, California. And, respecting perhaps the proportions, but maybe I shouldn't say so. In as much as Palladio, for example, transformed Vicenza in a way in the Palladio city par excellence, because it's filled with works by Palladio. Culver City, which was a sum of parking lots, became Eric Owen Moss city because he built a lot in this city, and now is a cultural destination for cultural tourism. Many architects and students from all over the world go to Culver City to see the creations of Eric Owen Moss. This is a possibility for any architect. You go to a forgotten or to a no man's land in a way, to a place without any glory that barely exists on the map, if at all, and you transform it through your own work. I think it's possible. That's what Eric Owen Moss did in Culver City. And if he did it there, why shouldn't another architect in another place do something similar? Architecture by Eric Owen Moss. Now, of course, the more conventional architect would protest, would say, this is not architecture, this is not possible, this is why complicate yourself? But even if we don't complicate ourselves, the truth is our mind and our soul and our psychology is so complicated. They are so complicated, and our world itself is so complicated that perhaps it's not so bad to attempt sometimes to evoke some of the qualities, the attributes, the troubles even of this world, either inner or outer. Again, this is just a very short introduction to the works of Eric Owen Moss. These are built works. This tower is being built now. Again, the rationalist and the Cartesian attitude vis-a-vis architecture can be perplexed. But I think from a certain point of view, there is more truth here than in our Cartesian assumptions. This is the man, Eric Owen Moss. As I said, he's one of the founders of Sci-Arc in Los Angeles and very involved with that school. Wolf Prix, the important architect from Vienna in Austria, said that Tom Main draws beautifully and Eric Owen Moss writes beautifully. And in a way, it is true. But Eric Owen Moss can also draw very well, and it's true, he is very connected with literature. And his architecture finds inspiration in writing, in words. But here we do not see words, we see volumes, we see buildings, we see models, we see visual materials. This is a tower he built in Culver City, and I think is impressive now because it is a presence. We could discuss about it, comparing it to, the idealism of the Russian constructivists, for example, but this was built 100 years later, and not in Soviet Union or Russia, but in on the western coast of the United States. And this is also interesting at night because there are projections on those curved surfaces that change. So it's an object, an architectural object. I usually hesitate to use the word object when I describe a building because I think a building is more than an object. But in this case, it's more like a sign, and a vertical sign that is closer in a way to what we might call an object. You see already there, projections on the curved surfaces of this tower. Again and again, sculpture is important. The plastic qualities of a building do matter. Even if you know nothing about architecture and you know nothing about Eric Owen Moss, if you see this building on the side of the highway or street, you'll probably turn your head or stop your car, or if you walk, you stop and maybe even attempt to climb the stairs. Because architecture is engaging, if it is engaging. And if it's not engaging, well, indifference is the result. This is a proposal for an opera building, I think, in Moscow, for a competition that he took part in, but he didn't win. This is in Culver City. When I said that ornament is coming back to architecture, here we have an example. This thing, I don't know how to call it, in the corner of the building is not ornamental in its nature. And you might protest, you might say, wait a minute, it's a loss of resources. But then, it is a loss of resources even when you use colors to paint on a canvas. If you think in these terms, then almost anything that we do is a loss of resources. But if you do something artistically significant, something that is provoking an emotion, a reaction, not necessarily a positive reaction, then I think it is worth doing. Unless, of course, we pollute the air beyond certain limits and add to the disasters of this world, which would, hopefully we try to avoid. This also he built. There is playfulness here. There is capriciousness. There is, provocation. But I think it's important to do things that are not conform. At least they have this attribute of novelty. And it's not just about novelty, but the static aesthetics is, I think, problematic today because we live in a very dynamic world. So Cartesianism, I think, is not adequate for our time, really. We go to the moon, we go to Mars, we travel wherever, left, right, up, down. We go to the bottom of the ocean, we travel through the web, incessantly and instantly. How could you continue to build, as if nothing happened, as if the world is not changed? I don't think it is so. I don't think that, the aesthetics of functionalism and international style are really adequate for our time, because they don't express the tumultuousness about time, the turbulence about time, and we do live in turbulent times. How could you build in a placid way when not far away from here the bombs are falling on Ukraine? I mean, this man is changing Culver City by himself. Well, he's lucky in a way that, of course, he provoked his own luck, because he builds many buildings in Culver City. And before he arrived there, Culver City was not really a city, was, as I said, just a sum of parking lots. This is an apartment building. Okay, it has some postmodern elements here, which are a little bit less convincing, but still the building is provocative and interesting, especially in this area of the public access. I wonder how these buildings will be seen, let's say 50 years from now. How will they be perceived? The man is very inventive. Now, of course, there is the whole school of Western US. No, Frank Gehry is there. He also is very involved with SCI-Arc. Tom Main is very involved with SCI-Arc, one of the founders, Eric Owen Moss, and there are others. So, there is a climate of disturbance there. But what if you create a disturbing architecture? Why not? I'm not saying that these are disturbing. No, I would see them rather as engaging, as enticing, not disturbing. But some people could think that they are disturbing because they are unsettling, because they are they promote instability as opposed to stability, like this building. Friedrich Nietzsche said, "I would only believe in a dancing God. I would only believe in a dancing God." Well, maybe Eric Owen Moss, with his idiosyncratic architecture, tries to move towards a dancing architecture. This is a house he built earlier in his career. He's almost 80 years old now. Here he is. I admire the architects who take risks and who, discover new territories or open up new frontiers for architecture. This is the tower that we saw at the beginning at night in two different situations. It's not bad. All kinds of studies in his office where again and again form is important. Architecture is not just function, it's also form. And with the new forms, you might provoke even new functions. This is a building that is being built now. This is a rendering, but it is being built now. This one, no. This one was not built, but anyway, this is his proposal. Maybe it was for that competition in Taiwan, which was won by Stefan Dorin. It looks like it a little bit, but I could be wrong. Towers could be imagined, projected for countless places. Here he is. You recognize Frank Gehry. He is actually at SciArc. This is Frank Gehry here, maybe close to being 90. And I wonder, why is it that we are not so adventurous in architecture, and these people are? Why? Because we do have the imagination that they do have, but we banished joy from creating architecture, and joy comes from a sense of discovery, from a sense of being a pioneer, inventing something, even something foolish is important. Culver City, Eric Owen Moss, a housing complex. If you would have respected here the context, the urban context, let's call it urban context of Culver City, he would have created meaningless buildings, but he opposed that context. Okay, now we go to the second presentation, which is just a second, which is about Ralph Erskine, a very important British architect, or should I say Swedish architect, because he lived and worked in Sweden, but he was born and raised and educated in England. Now, Ralph Erskine was a very different architect from Eric Owen Moss. And you'll understand why. Because he was not so much playing with form, although he uses form too, but he was very concerned with the climate. And he was one of the first architects to recognize the importance of connecting the building with a certain place, a certain climatic attributes, and so on. And this is important, especially for our time. I think it's very, very important. This was the man, Ralph Erskine. So he died in 2005, but he lived for 91 years. Architect, meaning architectonic heads, Ralph Erskine. A wise architect, and I actually think that he deserves to be known more than he actually is. He is appreciated, but less known. Ralph Erskine, a romantic functionalist. A romantic functionalist. And when I continuously remind myself of this very word, romantic, what if we do again a romantic architecture? That it is functionalist romanticism or romantic architecture, or without functionalist anything, but just a romantic architecture. How would a romantic architecture be like? This is what he said: the first and fundamental function of architecture is to be an extension of our clothes, to protect our emaciated bodies from the climate oddness and improve the microclimate of our surrounding environment in relation with the natural one. I think it's a valid thought, an important one. The first and fundamental function of architecture is to be an extension of our clothes. But our clothes are not rectangular, are they? This is one of the first buildings he built, if not the first one. I'll show also a small house he built for himself in Sweden. Now I just show some images from his work, and then we'll go a little bit more in detail with some works. He worked like the Scandinavian, like the Scandinavians in general, very well with natural materials, with bricks, with wood. Um, he tried all kinds of things, and he was not indifferent to form. As you can see, he has even a futuristic side, but not a neurotical futurism like in the case of Erik Owen. These are early houses that he built in Sweden. He also built significant apartment buildings, both in England and in Sweden. I like very much his apartment buildings because they are so different from most blocks of flats. You know, there is something indeed romantic about them, and there is variation, there is diversity, there is multiplicity in unity, and there is humanness. You know, you see bicycles there, a little tricycle for children, in fact two, in fact three tricycles, and the buildings have various sizes, so they are very human. I think this is an industrial building, but even this building as an industrial building, I find it, fascinating actually. Ralph Erskine, Sweden. Don't worry, we'll have colored pictures as well. We have almost 200 pictures with Ralph Erskine. I really feel he understood what a home is, and he understood, the necessity for variation, for diversity, for integration, and for considering very seriously the climate. You see, without specifically targeting aesthetical concerns, I think he created actually formally very engaging architecture. But but the cause of this interesting appearance of his buildings was not form, but it was actually ecology, or a concern, a deep concern with the cardinal points, with where the wind blows, with where the sunlight comes from, and so on. Apartment building. Who saw such apartment buildings before? Drawings, some drawings by Ralph Erskine. Here he is drawing. Well, he was already an older man when the computer arrived in our profession. He drew manually. This is a project he did for some kind of community in the north. I don't know where, in Alaska maybe, with a lot of snow, of course. Not afraid to use color, not afraid to imagine a citadel, because in a way it is a citadel. You see, with the apartment buildings that surround like a curved wall, the communal life, and then smaller buildings at the inside, protected by this enveloping wall, so to speak. This is the house he built for himself, and we are going to see it in detail. Again, we see a clear concern with ecology. After all, he wrote here an ecological Arctic town. Climate is very, very important. You know, we should think about, snow, rain, sunlight, These are very, very, very important elements, and I'm afraid we don't always think of them properly. Funny renderings. I wish we had this winter something like this in Bucharest, but we didn't. Not like this, no. And I wonder if we'll have again something like this. This is the house he built, and we are going to see an image. It's a very, very nice house. And especially, you know, what is very interesting, he covered this elevation of the building, the back side of the building, with cut wood that is used in the you know, in the stove, because fire is at the center of the house. I mean, not the geometrical center, but it's here. You need warmth, you need fire, you need warmth because it's cold there in Sweden. So fire is immensely important. This is the site plan of the house. I think it was the first house or the second house he built for himself. Now I just show some drawings by Ralph Erskine. Now the first private home in Stockholm, it means it was the first house he built for himself. This is the house that we saw the plan of here. It's a very small house, but I think it responds in its essence to what a home is or should be. It's very small. We'll come back to the plan. I don't know when he built this, maybe immediately after the Second World War. It makes me think a little bit, although it's more so-called modern, less radical than Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier. And look, this is the elevation, the back elevation or facade of the building. Isn't it interesting? Actually, not only that he protects this side of the building, maybe it's north there, but also he protects the wood to an extent. And that wood is being used to warm up the building. The truth is, whatever Jean Nouvel might have said, because he said a nice apartment is a large apartment, I don't know if it's necessarily true. Of course, maybe it's nice to have a large space, a large apartment, but quality is not about dimensions. It's about atmosphere, it's about feeling, it's about intimacy. This is a very small house, but I think it would be very pleasant to live here. Another building by him, originally all exposed concrete, unfortunately, now painted. It's a large building, an opulent villa. and it was, refurbished, so to speak. Ralph Erskine. I mean, painted concrete. It's still concrete. What can we do? It was built like this. Today, I would discourage using concrete so much. But what else could we use? We don't have a great choice of materials. There are some choices, but not so many. Anyway, concrete probably will continue to be used, at least to an extent, but I think it would be good to kind of avoid it. The Arctic town, we already saw that project, some drawings. Another villa, this one rather modest. And I like this modesty, in fact. I like Erika on Moss, and I also like the modesty of this Scandinavian building. They are very different. Now, here, he is not trying to shock anybody. He's not trying to provoke anxieties or immense intoxicating joy, but it's still quality architecture. Another villa from 1969. The Scandinavians do know what a home is. He was not really a Scandinavian. He was born in Great Britain, but I think he adapted very well to Sweden. And what we look at here is actually a home, more than a house. It's a home. Maybe a little bit, maybe some echoes, maybe a little bit from Alvar Aalto, although he's a different kind of architect compared to Alvar Aalto. Nature is beautiful in Sweden. I was amazed when I spent a few days in Sweden. They have high technology, but also the highest respect for nature. And there are many lessons to learn in Sweden, I think. What is this? This is a complex a group of houses. Rather strange. If there were just two, maybe it wouldn't be so strange, but there are more than just two. Look at that. A little bit militaristically repeated like this in this rhythm. But interesting that towards the street, they offer almost no windows, just small windows, and then the triangular, tall, imposing wall. And that's how all the buildings are, and they open towards the courtyard. This is a theme in Scandinavian architecture, where the house has a certain level of introversion. And towards the exterior, it doesn't show so much. It doesn't open so much towards the exterior, but it opens towards its own courtyard. And this is what happens here. This kind of architecture could also be seen in a less maybe radical form in some Saxon, towns or villages in Transylvania. Not so radical and not so willful, but in essence, not very different, perhaps. It's almost like a Teutonic group of houses. Are they seven? They might be seven. I know the project theme for the second year students is 7 houses. Ralph Erskine. Now, this work I like very much. The Aula Magna in Stockholm is a educational facility, is a public building, but is done indeed with romanticism. It's a romantic public building. A romantic, not just because of the materials he used, like wood and brick, but also because of the way he was able to fragment the monolith of a, approximately large building and give it an intimacy, an almost domestic quality. And he played with the bricks like Alvar Aalto played in his experimental house that he built after the death of his first wife. I like this building by Ralph Erskine a lot. He also indulges a little bit in ornamentation, working with the bricks, to bring some sensitivity to the walls. It's a large building, but because of this fragmentation, almost medieval, with varied parts, with various windows, I think he did an excellent job. Who think of this building that is a university building, an aula magna? But yes, yes, he was a romantic architect. What is romanticism? We know the classic spirit is opposed to the romantic spirit. The best architects are probably able to negotiate between the classical and the romantic and create some kind of a balance. Maybe Carl Friedrich Schinkel was an architect who was able to create some kind of a balance between the classical and the romantic. But all good architects, I think, are able to create some kind of a balance between order and disorder. The romantic spirit is perhaps the one closer to what we might call instability or disorder. The romantic spirit likes revolutions, likes changes, likes instability, while the classical likes stability, rigidity even. It could denaturate itself into something authoritarian if it's excessive. But if you combine the two, you have a chance to create something that is simultaneously ordered and disordered, stable and unstable. This is a good work by Ralph Erskine. Because any entity, any center, any thing that is magna, to use the word of this very building, one of the names of this very building, is made up of fragments, of small entities. So again, we have multiplicity in unity. It's not just unity and it's not just multiplicity, it's both. You have the whole and you also have the fragments that compose the whole. And maybe this is the symbolism of all those bricks that are woven into the wall. And I like very much this quality of being woven this world. And the brick is the perfect material for this. You weave it, and it's like you weave a sweater. Here he was weaving a world. An ornament is almost unavoidable. Very nice. He created an event, an architectural event, just of this portion of the building, just this wall. It is an architectural event. And as you can see, it's a large building, public building, meant to be used by many people. And these people are like the bricks in the facades of the building. The small parts that compose the community. Wood inside. Somehow I find the building more interesting outside than inside. Now the London Arc. This is a very different kind of building. It's a building in London. It's a building that is destined. I mean, it's an office building, but the most unusual office building, I would say. Here it is. And unfortunately, I don't know enough about it, but the little I know is that this building came into being formally as well because of the eco constraints, if we are to call them constraints, about the characteristics of climate, where the wind blows, where the sunlight comes from, which is changing all the time, and we'll see a sketch a little bit later on with a section through the building that tries to explain how the building came into being by considering the many elements that constitute the environment within which this building was built. But even in plastic terms or artistic terms or sculptural terms or it's an impressive building. So what I'm trying to say is an ecological building doesn't have to be boring aesthetically. In as much as this building is not boring at all. It's an office building, but I think it transcends the mere functionalism of an office building. And at the same time, it is ecological. It's, I think, a very interesting building. In this section, we don't yet see the complexity of the viscerality of that atrium, but I think I have another, like a sketch, where we could feel this better, and we'll also see images of it. Like here, but this inner space, this atrium facilitates and expresses the dynamics of the public domain or public realm. People interact in this space, and the space expresses it, the interaction. There is variation here, and variety is important. Otherwise, we die of boredom. Within a building or within a city where everything is repeated ad infinitum, it's good to have variation. This is the sketch. Just a second. So you can see here many elements that he was considering, and it's not just an abstract sketch of a building that ignores the life within. Here we see many little people now. He was trying to build a building for these people, for the life of these people. I see that the sketch was 1989, so he was over 70 years old when he did this sketch. So as Erskine designed it, the arc erupted into an amazing 5-story high void on its south side. Its central atrium housed a mini village of circular meeting spaces and footbridges. So he created this, mini village within the office building in London. Mini village of meeting spaces. Very nice. Circular meeting spaces and footbridges. And this, 5-story high void is open towards south, meaning towards sunlight. Now, this is from 1968, a housing complex. Where is it? In Newcastle, in Great Britain. I think it is excellent. I mean, how many apartment buildings look like this? And I don't know what cardinal point this facade is oriented towards. It might be north, and this might explain the small windows. It's like a citadel. It's like a fortress in a way. But the color and even the treatment of the facades, there are capricious aesthetical statement here, like this, this, or I mean, there are artistic interventions here, and then the colors. It's important to take the building out of the domain of the predictable and to be expected, and to create something that deserves to be called a creation. Like here, he created with bricks this giant tapestry. It's like a rug, a vertical rug, right on the facade of the building. Very nice. And why not? Again and again, it's important when we create to not forget that we are also artists, and to express our subjectivity and our romantic longings, as Ralph R. Erskine did. This is a most unusual a block of flats. You can tell that this man, this architect, was not dogmatic. The other side of the building is very different because it's open towards the sunlight. Very nice and very varied. You can tell that for this man, architecture was not a purpose, was not a goal, but was a medium to serve life. Life was the goal, not architecture. Architecture was just a medium. But not an indifferent medium, something that would say, I do not exist aesthetically. I am just a medium, an indifferent medium. No, no. Paradoxically, perhaps, this medium achieved its highest personality exactly when it depersonalized itself. Although here we cannot say that it depersonalized itself. It is magnificently with aplomb, it's magnificently assertive with those red balconies, violent red. Bravo to him. Red is life. Red is love. Red is sunlight. Red is fire. Red is passion. Ralph Erskine, an apartment building. Why should apartment buildings be boring or gray? Why? We saw before Eric Owen Moss being courageous and experimental. Here we see a different kind of courage because this man was not really, trying to unsettle things with explosion of forms, but he arrived at forms from considering something else. As I said, the climate, the natural conditions of the context, ecology, even sustainability. And he created a very, very diverse architecture, starting from with a kind of modesty from the conditions of the context. He was not a formalist, no. Although, again, paradoxically, he did arrive at form, but not starting from form. As Mies van der Rohe himself said, we should always start from the inside, not from the outside. And I feel that this is what Ralph Erskine did too. Not afraid to combine the redness with the greenness, red and green, opposite colors. It's okay. As you can see, it's a very large housing complex, and the variety of forms he arrived at without being a formalist is amazing. He obviously loved to work for housing. It's very human. It's not intimidating. It's not imposing. It's not crushing. I think it would be great to have similar housing complexes in the world, with this romantic spirit, unafraid of color, unafraid of to curve a building if it is to be curved, but not because of formalism, but because of maybe following the trajectory of the sun on the sky, the apparent trajectory of the sun on the sky. Do you see here? There is joy, there is creativity, there is freedom, but there is also consideration of what matters to be considered. That is the climate. Very interesting architect, I think, Ralph Erskine. And these buildings are not built like in Singapore by UN Studio or who knows who, for an elite. These buildings are for so-called common people, not for the very rich and the privileged. No, for people like you and me. But architecture should not address only those in power or only those who are rich. Quite the opposite. I think it is a duty, a beautiful duty of the architect to take care first of those who cannot take care of themselves. Even the tree, I think, is happy in front of this building. Wooden houses. I like this project too, and I showed it 2 days ago, 3 days ago. It's actually, they are houses, but it's some kind of an art center. Apparently, he did this project for free. He worked for about 10 years to create this project. Of course, in the meantime, he did other things. But I think it's a very interesting cluster of buildings, of houses. There are 3 houses or 4, and then I think there are 6 or 7 buildings. But look at the architectural expression. You know, they are unusual with their emphatic balcony there at the top, and especially the roof at the top. Very Scandinavian in a way. It's almost like, he touched upon something mythical. You'd expect some Vikings to emerge from these buildings. They are emphatic, they are sculptural, but they're also modest. And I think great architecture is like this. It's probably a pleasure to live there, especially when the trees are blooming. There is nature and there is culture. There is culture and there is nature, and they are in a dialectical interaction, interplay. And if we can express this in our work, we do a good work, I think. I continue to think that this architect deserves to be known better than he is, because he was one of the good architects of the 20th century. Residential area. This is another housing complex, but perhaps a little bit less romantic than the previous ones we saw. But again, it depends on the context, on the requirements of those who commission the work. But even here, we can see a deep concern for life first, and architecture only as a medium. And he seems to have this theme where you have enveloping surrounding wall, here rectangular, that protects the softer middle ground, the softer inner activities and inner buildings. Like here too, you know, is inside there is more fragility, and outside there is almost like a fortress wall to protect what is inside. These again are not expensive buildings. They are for the common man, so to speak. So let's wish happy birthday to this so-called common man, this uncommon architect, Ralph Erskine. Thank you.